All
Are we
right.
on?
We're on.
Okay. So I, from the beginning of this article, got kind of hung up, not hung up, I would say, but asking how evidence-based practice is being considered to be so significant, of course, in this idea of spirituality, because spirituality, we believe in what cannot be seen, what we felt. And so now for us to say, okay, spirituality has an impact on treatment, but you got to be able to prove it. So in my notes, I was writing things like, is this a necessary evil? It makes sense in regards to health insurance and whatnot, that it would be something that would be something we move towards. But it also feels very much like the antithesis of a spiritual application in therapy. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I definitely thought similarly. I thought it was really interesting, to say the least. There's a lot from this article, so I have it by me, so I'm sorting it through. But yeah, I did think that was really interesting. I can't find it in my notes, but
And then I thought too, the fact it kind of aligned with everything we've learned about like the cultural class that we took.
yeah.
Like context of the patient characteristics, culture, and preferences being a crucial part of those evidence-based practices.
Wow.
So the individuality of the client, in addition to you have to be able to prove how this practice of spirituality is applicable to them. And it seems very much a new challenge.
Yeah, I liked how it talked about towards the end of the article, it was talking about the 4 guidelines for their evidence-based movement. And I liked how it considered cultural competency, spiritual competency, in parentheses, it's this is what it should be understood as, because it really is. And I think it would be interesting if we considered that even more part of our learning in our multicultural counseling courses. We kind of touched on it, but I wonder if we would have as much if we weren't a faith-based program too.
Probably not, but I did think it was interesting that they pulled different cultures in as examples to like the idea of Native American spiritual approaches versus African American spiritual approaches, or Latino spiritual approaches. And so it was interesting to see that, we obviously have to consider all of the factors.
Right.
And so you remember the argument they made about this is a soft science. It feels like it's moving more and more into a very definitive hard science, with the neurogenesis that we study, in addition to the multiple factors we now have to consider before we develop our treatment plans.
And having to know what our limits are too. It talked a lot about how if we aren't able to provide accurate spiritual guidance, in a sense, towards the persons, we need to utilize a lot of different resources, including maybe even working with clergy and stuff like that, which I thought was interesting. I've never really thought about us collaborating with I guess pastoral staff and stuff like that in any way, but it makes sense.
No, it does, but it also too, I wonder how many people who, how many counselors who are older counselors, they have someone come in who's got a completely contrasting spiritual background from what they're used to practicing, and they just think to themselves, oh, I'll just learn this by myself. It's moved into the question of, how is it ethical for us to treat someone who we have no expertise in that particular aspect of their lives, especially if it's significant to them? What should be the mandates or the guidelines? What should be more explicitly stated? And I know it comes back to that whole, we kept hearing over and over again. Remember in ethics, it depends. It depends.
Really
It depends. But I think
yeah,
there's this fine line that feels like we have to walk between learning, continuing to learn, continuing to develop, and then, okay, I don't know enough yet. I probably need to refer you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like I think probably the hardest areas to know that into. And too, like, I was even thinking, like, it talks about, like, you need to be trained to be spiritually competent, but like, what does that even really mean in itself? Like, and it kind of touched on that, but like, what's the measurement for us knowing whether we're competent in an area? In this, and it seems like that's in the process of really just being developed now, so it'll be interesting, because I feel like I took a lot of like different variety of classes at a pretty liberal undergrad school, and got lots of different perspectives, learned lots about different religions, but like, I don't know how much that will really help me, like, it's hard to say.
I would be surprised if it didn't help you quite a bit, even if it's just to understand some of the different perspectives, and to, even if you don't agree, you can say, okay, I can see where it evolves from. And I think that having, even if we're not experts in that field, having some understanding of it is significant in our development as people.
Right.
Creating that whole empathy for others.
Right. And being able to think like critically about something in like positive and negative ways, but like let the positives of this person's story, and their faith guiding that too.
No, I'd say so. I did think it was important, like that they pointed out that we need to assess spirituality. Like, it was so emphasized by the numbers that they pulled from the study, that even if someone is not very openly saying, I'm Christian, I'm Buddhist, I'm Muslim, that us assessing how significant it is within their own life will help us to, identify if that's a field that they want to move into. For example, my husband is extremely private about his spirituality. Mm-hmm. Not something he dialogues about. And that's just who he is. So I know I'm good and well that, had the counselor not asked, then that would never have even
been a part of it.
Or in a session, because not a part of what he discusses on a regular basis.
Right. Which is good that you ask and continue to ask then. Yeah, I liked that part a lot too. Again, it feels kind of broad and vague, but I don't know, I get kind of excited, like, because the hope of it is to kind of understand, like that one, understand the state of the research, as it kind of intersects with each population. And so, it's not clear necessarily to me, like, where we get those resources all the time to assess where people are at, and if they want to continue to have it be a part of their session and their time. But I think it's really important that they brought up that I definitely wouldn't have thought about. Like, I probably would have just totally assumed, like, oh, they said they want to talk about this, or they don't. So
I think it kind of ties back in with one of the books we read, where it talked about like the level of intimacy you develop with your mental health counselor. So we're talking this hugely intimate relationship. So it makes complete sense that we have understanding of what the client considers significant as far as spirituality in his or her life, because guess what? This is maybe one of the most intimate relationships that person's ever had, what they're sharing with you. So being able to say, okay, is this something relevant? Is something we should make relevant? I think it's so significant in us developing a treatment plan.
Yeah, seriously. I liked too that they kind of like researched some of the effectiveness of spirituality, like with CBT, and how that like worked with different like faith backgrounds. That was fun to see that like was studied and applied. I think it would be interesting to read more about those studies in particular. Like I kind of want to just go research them and see how it worked for them. Like I think that's cool.
Yeah, so I think that was definitely something of importance for us to know.
Yeah.
And spiritual approaches that are proven more effective. We are treating the individual and we're having understanding of what might work based on their perspective. Is not a part of what we're doing. So I think that's definitely hard. I will say that it ties really strongly in for me. Like my first teaching career actually began in New Orleans in some of the inner city schools. And so I didn't have a lot of experience with that world. So because I lacked an understanding of their perspective and their worldview, they didn't get the kind of individualized education that initially that they probably needed.
Right.
So as I became more accustomed to other aspects of that world, I was able to say, okay, here's what is significant to them. And so I think that it kind of ties in the same way, like knowing what the spiritual worldview is.
Right.
They say, okay, you know, what can I use that will help this person in their healing process?
Right. That's a great point. That's cool that you've seen it so like specifically, like that you see this being so applicable in your life. Like you've like, I've seen how that hasn't really worked.
Oh, I think if you're it's okay to fall on our faces. I'm not going to say it's not.
Yeah.
It's what we do after we fall on our faces that kind of determines what will happen next. So, you know, if I have a client that I don't know anything about whatever pan Middle Eastern spirituality, faith-based system they adhere to, then at least they say, okay, I don't know, so let's find someone who does. Because that's part of the growth process. So acknowledging I love to use the word failure. Let's go with challenges. Acknowledging our challenges
or limitations, as all our texts always say.
Yes, acknowledging those is a crucial part of us developing as people. It's okay.
Yeah,
we have to do that.
Yeah.
I did think it's interesting to talk about this collaboration with clergy. So I wondered, so say you're in a more rural area. So what if you are working with someone who is entirely different spirituality than the main public? I mean, we're talking like very limited. Like they may even go to church through commuting.
Right.
So how do we approach that? And that was one of the things I thought about, you know, like in this age of technology, you know, if there's no one accessible to treat them who has more expertise than we do, or
right. That's a really good point.
What do we do next?
Yeah, because there are those situations, and I think even in our like, you know, cohort of people in this program, like there's people who live way out in the middle of nowhere with not a lot of, you know, resources available. So yeah, what do you do when you can't really collaborate? Interesting. Yeah.
I think I wanted it because we have isn't one of our colleagues in like North Pole, Alaska?
I feel like someone is in Alaska. Yeah, which is...
I think it is North Pole, Alaska, because there was a joke about, you know, I guess I know Santa.
That's awesome.
And so, I mean, like we're talking, there is a really high substance abuse there, especially among the indigenous people. So with that kind of tribal background, with that kind of spirituality being play, and you're being so isolated from not just geographically but culturally, I mean, how do we provide best possible treatment?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like the same, like the answer we were talking about earlier, like it depends, but like it just it does. Like it kind of depends on who you're able to network with, and I mean, I would imagine, and who you're able to, I don't know, draw a relationship from, and how comfortable your workplace, or you feel like kind of utilizing probably more like online resources and stuff like that, or yeah, you definitely have less to draw from. That would be so intimidating, feeling so removed.
Like it would be, but I also wonder, like, for the right person, I mean,
Totally.
Opportunity to develop some expertise.
Totally.
So how would we go about that? So I think kind of the same thing applies. So I'm like, we're in the West, or I'm in the Midwest. So, we have quite a few reservations, Native American tribes. So how, I have a client come in who is Native American. I am very obviously not. So how do I make sure that they are getting treatment that best matches potentially their cultural background
and their spiritual world and view? It's so hard because spirituality is so like specific to each individual that even like having knowledge on it in one area, you have to factor into the consideration how that person interacts with their faith. Like it's like reading what's that book called, Sacred Pathways, in our other class that we're in, like and it talks about the 9 different like pathways that people connect with God. And so thinking about like trying to understand an individual and where they're coming from in that in-depth way for each faith or place they identify, it takes a lot of like us being proactive and studying those things well and learning how people I guess express their faith as an individual, because it's so, and maybe that's more of like a Christian culture thing that it's so individualized, but I feel like it's not necessarily that way,
Yeah, I feel like you're right. I don't think it's just Christianity that's individualized, because we have like the major precepts that everybody who identifies as Christian to, and then you also though have like some of the different offshoots. So say you have somebody who is Muslim, but they adhere to only various certain tenets of that, whether it's, and then you have those who are very extremist to those who are more relaxed about. So I would say that I think that that's a human characteristic.
I would think so. I would think so too. Even amongst cultures that are more, I guess, not as individualistic as our society, I think the emphasis on having like it be their own is still there. So I liked kind of going to like just the begin, like closer to the beginning. I really liked how even just like engaging clients like from the beginning, like about their interest in spirituality. I just liked how the example was given. Like I was wondering if spirituality or religion is important to you, and like I just liked how they phrased that, and like if so, like tell me about that, and what does that look like to you? Like it's unassuming, and I feel like a low-key kind of way to approach and try to understand, and asking them sooner rather than later, like we were talking about, helps us understand maybe where we're limited, if we need to pass someone on to someone who's better equipped.
I'd say that's probably the case, the understanding of that I don't know, it's like I said, it's not fine, like that we air quoted it, but it depends. So significant with this. Although in the same sense, I would say, like, for example, like the Alaska element, if you're working and it's a tribal situation, and you're the only mental health professional accessible, can you go to the tribal leader? Can you get some of the information you need in regards to that process? Is there any way to start the education you need to help others? Kind of in the same way we're in this program now.
Right. And probably, I mean, you would have to. And like you said, you'd kind of have to have a heart for that, because otherwise you wouldn't really have much of a career, I would imagine. And so, yeah, you would have to kind of collaborate and hope. I know we have some different tribes where I live in Washington, and I live probably like half an hour away from one, if that. And I know they are really open to like people within the greater community of the county that we live in. They're really open to, especially mental health care from the greater community. Like a lot, like we learned about too, like a lot of tribes and stuff have really high rates of depression and suicidality, and that's definitely the case here too. And and there's lots of opportunities for staff from churches, from all kinds of backgrounds, from churches and mental health workers, social workers, everyone to just collaborate together, and they do all the time. And so it's cool to see that. But I haven't particularly looked much into like interning there or anything like that, because I don't know if I would feel super equipped, going in right away to that kind of interning at that kind of place or and stuff like that. But eventually, I think it would be cool to. And I'm sure that I will interact with that group. So yeah, it's interesting to try to gauge that culture and their faith system more.
I think the reality is sometimes it's going to be an uphill battle being women in these cultures that are predominantly patriarchal.
Yes.
I think it'll be a challenge for us to both to convince the client of their expertise, but also I know that I struggle with that element of pride. Like, okay, I'm here, I'm trying, and to be able to pull myself back in and remember it's not about me, it's about the client. Right. Really center myself on their needs. So I think that's going to be an ongoing experience.
Especially I don't know, most people I'm definitely younger. I'm in my mid-20s, and especially my age is going to play a factor, which honestly it really hasn't for a really long time because I'm so tall. And people have always thought that I'm older than I am. But I think that's starting to not happen as much. And so, yeah, not only thinking about interacting within those cultures, they are predominantly patriarchal, but as a young person too, is definitely going to be difficult because a lot of the people who are struggling on this reservation are people within my age range, and so they're like, well, what are you gonna do? This young white girl coming over and trying to help, kind
of dismissive element.
Yeah. So I think you're right. It does take a little bit of I don't know, confidence and maybe even a little bit of pride. No, I've learned this, ownership of your learning and your skills.
Yeah. Well, 25 minutes.
Nice. Anything else that stood out to you?
No, I think we touched you and I must have been making the same notes because we all the same stuff.
I
mentioned is something I'd actually written down or noted.
Yeah, same. Yeah, the only other thing that I thought was interesting is that, we've been reading a lot of articles about similar threads of counseling and the relationship of spirituality. And I just thought it was cool seeing a lot of the same things being consistently said in each article. And the one that stood out to me the most, like the higher levels of spirituality, like are typically related to better health and mental health. And so like, I feel like we've just gotten that over and over and over again. And it's just, I'm always encouraged when I like see that same message from different areas, like.
Yeah, no, that is reassuring.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool.
Rachel, we did it.
We did it.
Yeah.